Shalom. This week's Sedra is Sedra Behar. There are more than 30 land disputes between nations in the world today. From the Sahara Desert to Taiwan, countries disagree about land ownership everywhere. As I write this Torah, a war is raging between Russia and Ukraine over disputed territories. Of course, the most popular conflict over disputed territory is the Israeli-Arab conflict, which in truth is probably a dispute that is much more about religion as land. Jews don't maintain the land belongs to them because of international law, but because God gave it to the Jewish people. What was the nature of God's gifting the land of Israel to the Jews? In our Torah portion, we learn the prohibition of an individual selling their portion of land. God said, "The land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are but stranger residents with me." In his commentary to this prohibition, Ramban wrote, "Do not consider yourselves the main owners of the land. You are with me in ownership. It's enough for the servant to be as his master. When it is mine, it is yours." The concept of God and the Jewish people jointly owning the land of Israel is a complex idea, and Ramban explained it in an esoteric fashion way beyond the scope of this Dvar Torah. The Ramban's explanation reminds us of the first comment of Rashi to the Torah. Rashi asked, "What is the reason then that the Torah commenced with the account of creation? Should the nations of the world say to Israel, 'You are robbers, you took by force the lands of the 7 nations of Canaan'? Israel may reply to them, 'The entire earth belongs to God who created it and gave it to whom he pleased. When God willed, God gave it to the Canaanites. And when God willed, God took it from them and gave it to us, the Jewish people.'" Our Torah portion wasn't the first time God stated the land was God's land. Earlier in the Torah we learned, "Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. Indeed, all the land is mine." There's a direct connection made throughout the Torah between the Jewish people owning the land and the observance of mitzvot. While God gave the Jewish people joint ownership of the land, the partnership was conditional on the Jewish people observing the mitzvot. If the Jewish people abandon their observance of mitzvot, they violate the terms of the partnership and lose their part of the land, and it reverts to a different nation. My Rebbe, Rav Sinai was sent to the ghetto on Sedra Behar over 75 years ago, and was freed from the camps on Sedra Behar 1 year later. Each year, on Motzi Sedra Behar, he used to gather all his direct descendants, over 300 strong, his friends and his students, and host a celebratory meal, a siyum, to demonstrate his gratitude to God for saving him from the Holocaust. At that siyum, Rav Sinai wouldn't just speak of his time in the Holocaust, but of his joy at being able to come to Eretz Yisrael after surviving the horrors of the Holocaust. He would speak of the blessing that we have to experience the return to Eretz Yisrael as a people, and to have taken control of Eretz Yisrael once again. He would also warn, as someone who experiences God's wrath at what he believed was a punishment for abandoning the Torah, that keeping the land of Israel was dependent on observing the mitzvot, and we will only keep the blessing of governing Eretz Yisrael if we observe the laws of the Torah. To my great loss, Rav Sinai passed away 2 years ago, and there are no more siyumim celebrating the special Shabbat Behar. While I won't be able to celebrate with him this year, I will remember his lessons and commit to teaching them to future generations. Shabbat Shalom.